Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples Integrated Recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Welcome back. This is another episode inspired by current clients. One thing that comes up semi-frequently for people that have substance use problems or addiction is that they only want to meet with me one-on-one, that they do not want to go to any kind of residential program, intensive outpatient program, or a peer group, peer support like AA or NA or Al-Anon, or Smart Recovery. They don't even have to be a 12-step program. So I am well aware that when I make a recommendation for any kind of group, there's probably about a 1% chance that they are actually going to go, and they just kind of nod and acquiesce like, oh yeah, I'll check that out. And I know that they won't. But when I try to make the case for them to go to any of these different things, whether that is an actual treatment setting or a peer group, this episode and what I'm going to talk about today is the case for why they should do that. And I used to run a lot of groups. In fact, at some points, I really loved it. I was incredibly active in 12-step groups and chairing meetings and going to meetings every day and running clinical groups. I've run intensive outpatient groups, 3-hour groups several days a week. I loved it for a season, and I also got kind of crispy from it. Too many people that were in those rooms who didn't want to be there, court-ordered or spouse-pressured, checking a box, and I was pouring energy into a room while somebody else was cashing a check on that, and that will drain you no matter how much you love it. So I stepped away, which is why I primarily only do one-on-one now. But a lot of the deepest change that I have ever witnessed has come from those rooms. And I'm talking about either AA or Al-Anon if you're a loved one that is surrounding addiction, or in treatment. So I'm going to talk about some common themes that can exist in groups. This is just about groups, not necessarily addiction, but just group work. And you're not going to get that in a one-on-one private office, but you're going to find it in circles with the crappiest fold-down chairs, in AA basements, and in places where people can't hide behind insight and intellectualizing. And I am kind of outspoken with some of my critique of recovery culture. Sometimes there's some moralizing that doesn't land well for me, or it doesn't land for other people. So I don't fully romanticize AA or 12-step culture. However, I do know this: if your wounds were formed in relationships, whether that is in your family of origin or in school, or that you were left out or anything like that, then isolation is not going to finish the job, my friend. You reorganize yourself when other people see you, react to you, confront you, and forgive you. So today, I'm going to use a framework from Dr. Irvin Yalom, that going back to my grad school group therapy days, and I'm going to outline 11 mechanisms that he talked about with why group therapy and why rooms like AA produce change at a depth that individual work often does not reach alone, so let's walk through them carefully. Grab your notepad. Number 1 is installation of hope. Hope in individual therapy often comes from the therapist. So if you got someone like me who has their own lived experience with addiction, then that might be helpful. But in a peer group, hope often comes from the room, because you sit across from someone who has relapsed 3 times or lost their marriage, or they're in detox again, and now they have 2 years sober. And you can't argue with that. That's not theory. It's observable data from lived experience. And in AA, this is constant, because newcomers here, I have been exactly where you are. And that compresses time, it short circuits despair, and in one-on-one therapy, you may believe that I'm optimistic because it's my job and I'm getting paid to sit there with you, but in a peer group, that hope is peer verified. It hits differently. Second is universality. Shame thrives in the belief that your defects are uniquely yours, and group very quickly destroys that illusion. Someone says something raw. You feel the electric shock of recognition. You realize that your private insanity that you would never even write down in a journal is an ordinary human struggle, and that a dozen other people inside that room are going through the exact same thing that you would never say out loud. And AA does this very powerfully, because the first time that someone hears their internal dialogue spoken out loud by another person, something shifts and that isolation cracks. I can recall the first time that I had ever heard, it wasn't even someone reading it from the book, but a woman was just quoting AA literature. Now, as an outsider, I had no idea that this was literature, but she said something. At this point, I was a police detective, trying to go to AA meetings, trying to get my shit together. My life was a mess. And she said something that felt like somebody stabbed me in the guts. And she said that there were times that it felt like I was regaining control, but intervals were usually brief and inevitably followed by less control, which led me to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And if you have ever lived that experience, that will light something up inside of you, because you know exactly what that feels like. And to hear it spoken out loud by another person who normalizes it and makes you feel like you're not a total fuck up, it can remove or reduce your defensive posturing, because you stop thinking, what's wrong with me? And start thinking, oh, everybody here does this. And that change reduces shame way faster than any kind of one-on-one insight that you're ever going to get working with a therapist individually. Third is imparting information. This might be one of the least glamorous factors, but still very important. Groups share practical knowledge, relapse prevention strategies, boundary scripts, how to survive a holiday sober, how to tell your partner the truth when you know that it's going to hurt their feelings, how to handle a craving at 2 o'clock in the morning. And in AA, you get applied survival knowledge from people who have actually executed it. In therapy, you get evidence-based tools that are delivered by somebody who is trained to deliver them correctly. And both of those different modalities matter. The difference is repetition, because in peer groups, so one thing I hear from people that go to an AA meeting is that they read a lot of the same literature, like more about alcoholism or about the 12 steps or whatever. And certainly my first times going to meetings, I heard that and I was like, oh my God, what a cult. They just keep reading the same thing over and over and over again. And one time an old timer sat down with me and said, it's just kind of to get us all on the same page and remind us why we are here. And the principles that are being reinforced from multiple mouths, and that redundancy strengthens learning. It becomes culture, not just instruction. The fourth point is altruism. And this one can surprise people because you think that you're going to a group to get help, but you stay because you helping other people stabilizes you. Think about Matthew Perry. He talked a lot. I mean, this poor guy, he lapsed and relapsed so many times. And if you watch any of the interviews, he talked about how he would give the shirt off of his back to help another addict. And because it feels good to help somebody else. A lot of times we can give other people advice or share our experience, but then it's hard for us to apply it for ourselves. And addiction and trauma shrink your world. Your focus becomes self-protective, hypervigilant, self-referential. But in AA or another peer group, someone asks you to help them, and suddenly you matter to somebody else's recovery, and that responsibility helps you organize your own behavior. Being useful builds dignity. And in one-on-one therapy, you receive support, yes, but in group, you give it, and that giving shifts identity. You're no longer just a wounded person, you're a contributor. So are you already noticing how this is surpassing one-on-one therapy? Do you see the pattern that's coming? Individual therapy is great with insight, strategy, trauma processing, emotional containment, but the group is giving you exposure to real-time relational dynamics, shame reduction through shared experience, responsibility with others, and identity reconstruction. Hope you're keeping notes here. Number 5, corrective recap of the primary family group. Many people's core attachment patterns are built in childhood. Approval seeking, withdrawal, dominance, submission, hyper-responsibility, chaos tolerance, emotional shutdown. These patterns do not disappear just because you understand them, but they do reappear in group. You gravitate toward the dominant personality, or you feel invisible, or you feel rejected by somebody who's speaking the language and seems like they're the person that people look to. You feel complete, or you appease, or you test boundaries, you try to control. Group recreates the emotional texture of family life, and the difference is that this time the system is conscious and probably healthier than family of origin. So in AA, let's say, for example, and let me just clarify, because some old timer somewhere is going, you shouldn't say AA. I'm just speaking from one person's experience with a peer program. Is that fair? In a peer program, you'll see father figures, you'll see rebels, you'll see caretakers, over-talkers who don't shut up even when the chair tries to shut them down, quiet observers who people see them every day and they never talk. The room is like a micro family. Your reflexive role shows up even if you are not trying. And in one-on-one therapy, I can help you analyze your family history, but in a group, your nervous system reenacts it. That reenactment gives us something alive to work with. And when you respond differently, when you assert yourself instead of collapsing, that becomes a corrective experience. 6, development of socializing techniques. Some people have never practiced direct communication in a safe environment. They either explode or disappear, and group forces reps, because when you say something like, hey, when you interrupted me, I felt dismissed. Or you might tolerate someone saying, when you joke about everything, I can't take you seriously. Then you are forced to sit in some discomfort and not flee. Of course, yeah, sometimes in peer-led recovery, someone will storm out and go have a cigarette or something like that. But these are live drills practicing. I think AA refers to itself as like a spiritual kindergarten. It's real-time behavioral training. And in peer programs, you watch how long-term members handle confrontation. I can recall one guy sharing about how what his growth had looked like, that somebody else at one point came to him after a meeting to confront his share and let him know, why that didn't fit and why that is wrong and blah, 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 blah. And the guy just sat there and just nodded and took everything. And then he pulled his glasses down and he just said, "Is there anything else?" And when the guy said, "No, that's it," he's like, "Okay, thanks," right? Like no need to defend it or anything like that. And you may not see that in a Facebook comment section of two people fighting, right? You can also see people own making a mistake publicly and how they apologize. One person in a peer program I saw, she had cut somebody else off because she perceived that he was talking too long. And it was kind of a messy, heated moment where he was like, "Actually, I'm not done." Anyway, the next day in a meeting, she came back and she, in her share time, said, "I really need to owe this guy an apology and to the group. I don't know why I do crazy shit like that sometimes. I have this crazy part of my brain that I do crazy stuff, and that wasn't right. And I'm sorry about that, and I'm going to keep working on that." Man, you don't see people owning their shit like that very often, but you see it in groups. And we absorb social functioning through exposure. In one-on-one therapy, I might do some role play with you, but in group, the stakes are real. The emotional activation is real, and that makes learning stick. Number 7 is imitating behavior. Humans model constantly. You can watch someone handle shame with honesty. You can watch someone regulate after being called out. You can watch someone admit that they relapsed without collapsing into self-hatred. And you internalize those responses. And in a program like AA, you'll hear a sponsor say, "I messed up. I told my wife the truth the same day afterward." And that models integrity under pressure. Now, in programs like AA, they have a rule of no crosstalk, meaning you shouldn't comment on somebody else's share or anything like that. But in group therapy, there is crosstalk. And so in a group, you may hear someone say, "I thought you didn't like me, so I kind of stopped talking or I pulled away." And that models vulnerability. These behaviors become templates. You don't need to invent emotional maturity from scratch. You can copy it until it starts to integrate and imprint for yourself. Individual therapy can describe healthy functioning. Group lets you witness it until you are ready to embody it through all of that repetition. And that repetition really wires people. 8, interpersonal learning. And this is a heavyweight mechanism. Interpersonal learning has 2 parts. 1, you learn how you actually come across. And 2, you experiment with behaving differently and observe the result. So for example, you may think that you're just direct, but perhaps the group experiences you as aggressive. Or you may believe that you're low maintenance, and maybe the group experiences you as an outsider or distant. You may think that you're laid back, but maybe the group experiences you as disengaged. And feedback in group bypasses a therapist's authority. It's horizontal, and that makes it harder to dismiss. In AA, someone might say, "When you dominate the meeting, it pushes people away." And that hits differently than a therapist saying it. And here's the key, is in a peer program like AA, you're going to hear them saying over and over and over again, "Keep coming back." And that is really important because Then you do come back and you try it again at the next meeting. Maybe you speak less, or you listen more, or you watch the room respond. And that loop, that behavior, feedback, and adjustment accelerates relational intelligence. In one-on-one therapy, you can become very articulate about your blind spots, but in a group, you are forced to experience them. And experience changes people way faster than insight alone. And before we keep going, I'm going to pause here and just kind of recap a little bit of this. You can build a polished narrative about yourself in individual therapy that you are thoughtful, reflective, and self-aware. Guilty. That does not mean that you are easy to live with. Group strips away narrative control. You don't get to curate your image. 10 people are watching and responding to you in real time, and that feedback is cumulative. The density of interpersonal data is impossible in a two-person office. Also, my mom tells me that she listens to this podcast, and sometimes my words are like too grad school jargony, which I'm not even aware that I do that. Like, I just feel like I'm just talking. But AA will give you this without clinical language. The social accountability alone forces behavior into the open. You can't hide the same way. If your problems are relational, and most adult pathology is, then relational exposure is the arena for change. So we've covered 8 factors. We've got 3 more. And these are the ones that force and consolidate change that make it durable. So again, quick recap. So far you've got 8 mechanisms: hope, universality, there it is, information, altruism, then deeper work, family reenactment, social skills, imitation, and impersonal learning. Now we go to the final 3. These are the ones that consolidate growth and make it durable. Number 9 is group cohesiveness, because cohesion is belonging. It's the felt sense that you're accepted by the group and your presence matters. Cohesion is not sentiment, it is attachment in motion. When a group bonds, members stay engaged long enough to tolerate discomfort. They risk more disclosure, and they can also receive harder feedback without leaving. Maybe they might leave that meeting, but they'll come back, usually. In AA, cohesion is structurally reinforced. Regular meetings, shared rituals, shared language, shared stories, service commitments, chips and anniversaries. There's continuity, and that continuity builds belonging. And in a psychotherapy group, cohesion develops when members consistently show up, witness each other's lives, and survive conflict without fracture. Why does this matter? Because people change in environments where they feel securely attached. You can confront someone directly when they know that they are not going to be expelled, banished, exiled, excluded, ostracized. Use your adjectives. In one-on-one therapy, the bond is a dyad, 2 people. It is powerful, but it's limited. You are securely attached to one person, but in a group, you learn how to belong in a network, and that much more closely resembles real life. If your early attachment was chaotic or conditional, then cohesive group experience repairs that template. Belonging without performance reorganizes your identity. Number 10, catharsis. Emotional release alone does not create change. People cry in my office all the time. Sometimes I even tear up a little bit with them. What makes catharsis transformative in group is containment and reflection. You say something that you have never said publicly in a safe place. You break down, the group stays. No one flees, no one mocks you, and also importantly, no one rescues you prematurely. Then you just keep talking about what happened. And that sequence rewires your shame. In a program like AA, someone stands up and tells the truth about relapse, or maybe their behavior that they're not proud of, theft, infidelity, violence, humiliation, and they expect rejection, right? I've heard dozens of people talk about how when they share these things, they expect the sponsor to fire them and say, I can't work with you anymore, or for the group to say you can't come back. But instead, universally, there are nods. People who get it, they've been there. And that disconfirms core fear. In therapy groups, you might express anger towards another member, you tolerate the aftermath, and you stay in the room. And that is what builds emotional tolerance. In one-on-one therapy, you can discharge emotion safely. I can handle it, sure. In a group, though, if you discharge it in front of witnesses, that social exposure reduces the power of secrecy and shame. And the integration after the release is what really matters, because the group will help you reflect, contextualize, and metabolize the emotion so that it can become insight instead of just repetition. So catharsis inside of a relational container transforms way more than I can help you with one-on-one therapy. The last category is existential factors, and this is where Yalom is a little bit blunt. Groups eventually confront members with a reality. No one is coming to live your life for you. You are responsible for your own choices. Support exists, community exists, love exists, accountability exists. You have to act. And in AA, this is embedded in the structure because you can sit in meetings for years, and at some point, you may have a sponsor who's smoking a cigarette and says, "What are you actually doing differently?" Or in a therapy room, members call each other out and patterns get named. Avoidance becomes obvious. Existential responsibility lands heavier in a group because your behavior affects other people. If you relapse, it might impact people who looked up to you. If you isolate, the group feels it. They may even be asking, "Where's Brian? We haven't seen Brian in forever. Like, is that guy like living with a bottle somewhere under a bridge, or is he like doing a podcast?" If you dominate, other people shrink. Your actions matter. In individual therapy, responsibility is internalized cognitively, but in group, it's reinforced socially, and that accelerates maturity. If that's all that you can tolerate of me going on today, here's an okay place for you to leave off. Otherwise, I'm going to circle back around and talk a little bit more. That was the 11 points, but why groups like AA or an IOP group outperform one-on-one alone, even if you're working with an exceptional therapist. Let's be precise. Individual therapy is excellent for processing trauma, complex diagnostic work, personalized strategy, maybe attachment repair in a dyad, meaning two people, but peer groups like AA or Al-Anon or an IOP group excel at relentless accountability, high-frequency exposure to a shared struggle, identity reconstruction through service, behavioral modeling at scale, and immediate social feedback. AA adds something else too, constancy. If a client tells me that they can't get to a meeting, we both know that that's not true, because there are probably at least 10 meetings a day through the day in Naples or worldwide across all the time zones. You can find a meeting online every 30 minutes or every hour, nearly every hour in a 24-hour period. That volume matters. Change is proportional to exposure. You can see me for individual once a week or maybe twice a week, but in AA, you can go to the rooms 5 times a week or 25 times a week, and that repetition will saturate your nervous system with a different culture. Culture shifts behavior faster than insight does. AA also eliminates the financial transaction, right? I mean, most people have a copay for therapy or they pay each session, but peers have no incentive to maintain your comfort. Instead, they are invested in their own survival too, and that reduces therapeutic hierarchy. You are one amongst many. There's something that is humbling and stabilizing about that. If your wounds were built in isolation, secrecy, and distorted relational patterns, then you will not resolve them alone. But groups put your patterns in motion. If you talk too much, the room will react. If you disappear, the room notices. If you deflect with humor, the room feels it. And if you avoid responsibility, the room will let you know. And you don't get to curate that yourself. Shame loses oxygen because other people admit the same impulses that you thought were uniquely yours. Belonging becomes possible without performance. Responsibility stops being abstract because your behavior affects people who are sitting 10 feet away from you. Therapy can help you understand your operating system, but group forces you to run new code in front of witnesses. You can keep analyzing your life in private, or you can step into a room where other humans see you in motion. And if your pathology shows up between people, it's going to get confronted. That's why group is not just supplemental, it's structural. That's why AA has sustained millions of people who couldn't think their way into sobriety. I certainly couldn't. And if you are serious about changing your life, then you're going to need to go to a place where you can feel seen, challenged, tolerated, and expected to grow. And I can help you with one-on-one therapy, but the group is going to be that corrective experience, and that is doing the work. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.